Welcome. If you're new in our class today, we thank you so much for coming. We hope you're going to want to be a part of our class. We've been through the whole Bible twice, every verse of every chapter of every book, all 66 books. This time we're hitting just the highest points. And so you'll see today in particular, we're going to start skipping bigger numbers of chapters and verses as we go along. Because I want you to get a feel for all these many kings, but we're not going to go into detail with 400 years of bad kings the way we did the other two times. So I'll just give you some of the highlights, some of the things that I think you really need to know, would want to know, that make the whole story of God's people make sense to you. But you'll see how I'm going to skip around today as we go along. We hope you'll want to come and be a part. We do intend to move through the Bible, but just taking the things that are most important. We won't do all 150 Psalms, for example. We'll just hit some of the best-known ones that convey the greatest themes. We believe the Bible is the inspired Word of God, but we think some people who wrote were more inspired than others. They did better. That's why you know the 23rd Psalm by heart and you don't know the 33rd Psalm by heart. The 23rd really speaks to the hearts of millions and millions of people. So we're trying to hit those high points, and we'll continue to do that as we go along. Let's pray. God, thank you for this beautiful day in August and all the people who've come to worship with us already, those who are now in Sunday school with us, and those who will worship with us at 11. You are gracious and merciful, and we trust that you will help us today read from your book and understand as we look for those things that are forever true about you and forever true about us. We offer our prayers in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. All right, today we're going to begin with the story of a man named Elijah, and he's called for you the Tishbite, because he came from a clan called Tishbe, and the Tishbe clan were a part of a larger one of the 12 tribes of Israel that had chosen not to cross over the Jordan, but to stay on the east side of the river. You hear all the time about the West Bank. They lived on the east side of the river in Gilead. And we've already dealt with Gilead right over here between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, but east of the river in modern-day Jordan, that the forces of King David and the forces of his son Absalom met in battle in Gilead. Elijah comes out of that same territory. So let's start with 17. Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, and if you've been away on vacation, let me just stop very quickly and remind you that Ahab was said to be the worst of the kings. After Solomon's death, you recall, north and south had separated again. You had Israel, the 10 in the north, Judah, the 2 in the south. Ahab is king in the north, and one of the worst things he did was to marry a pagan wife named Jezebel. Okay, so that name you know and remember, Ahab, her husband. So God has called a person now to help deal with Ahab and Jezebel, and they're leading all those 10 northern tribes into these gods and goddesses of fertility, the old pagan cults. All right? So, this guy has the courage to speak right up to the king as Yahweh, or I thought this was wonderful this week. Eva Marie Campbell was telling me that her daughter Hannah, her little boy, Dallas, is going to be a kindergartner this year, and little Hannah is 4 years older. And she said the other day something came up about God, and Hannah just blurted out, well, you know his name is Eye, Asher Eye. And Eva Marie said, beg your pardon, and she said, that's what Dr. Big said. And she got it right on the button, you know. I am who I am. So here it is. As the I am who I am, Elohim of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word. Now, if you can imagine the courage it would take for a nobody at that point. Elijah is a nobody. He will become a very important somebody. But at this point, he's a person from a rather obscure clan of one of the tribes living on the opposite side of the river who dares to come over to the capital city and say to the king, "It isn't going to rain, not even dew settle on the ground till I say." And I'm saying it because that's what the one true God is going to make happen. No rain till I say. Skip down to verse 8. Then the word of Yahweh, remember, if you're new with us, I don't want to belabor this for those who've been here in our class a long time. But Yahweh is the way the Eye Asher Eye was shortened, you recall. Since that's a fairly long name that only Hannah and I know, it was shortened over time to YHWH. On purpose by the Jews, it's unpronounceable. And in their text, they will often write those capital letters, YHWH. But, we Christians came along and we said, hey, you can't have a name you can't pronounce, and so we added an A and an E, and we ended up with Yahweh. So if I say Yahweh, it's just another way of referring to the name given to Moses at the burning bush, the I am who I am. Okay, then the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, that is to Elijah, go now to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there. Now, Sidon, remember, is in modern-day Lebanon. Okay, right on up the coast. I didn't draw my map very well here. It goes on up this way. And Lebanon, of course, is just immediately north of Israel, still is today. And two of the main ports in Lebanon, Tyre, Tyre, and Sidon. So we know where that is. This is in pagan territory. It's not Jewish territory. 2 weeks from now, our lection is going to be about Jesus and a woman of a Sidonian woman, a Syro-Phoenician woman, and we'll deal with that again. But all through the years, Sidon was usually a place of opposition. It was not a Jewish stronghold. Go now to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there, for I've commanded a widow there to feed you. She's going to take care of you, so you can concentrate on hearing me and doing what I tell you. So he set out and went to Zarephath. When he came to the gate of the town, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and said, bring me a little water in a vessel so that I may drink. As she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. But she said, as Yahweh, your Elohim, meaning what? She's a pagan in pagan territory. Her Elohim is not Yahweh. Her Elohim is probably Baal and Astarte, the gods and goddesses of fertility. As Yahweh, your Elohim, lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I'm now gathering a couple of sticks so that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. In other words, she's picking up sticks to build a little fire, cook the last of her little bit of oil and meal, and then they'll have nothing. That's how poor they are. Now, what's important here is that Elijah, the reason I'm going to spend a fair amount of time with Elijah is that the gospel writers, all these many years later, saw in John the Baptizer Elijah. Elijah as coming again before Messiah. And they've waited hundreds of years by the time Jesus gets there, and John the Baptizer becomes the Elijah figure. And Jesus will be portrayed. I mean, we're going to read some things that Elijah did, and then Elisha, who followed him, did. And the gospel writers are saying, you remember what Elijah did? Jesus can do more. You remember what Elisha did? Jesus can do more. So it's important that you have that background about Elijah. So here's the first big test. We've left his statement to the king. It's going to stop raining. It isn't going to rain again till God tells me to tell you it's going to rain. It's not going to rain. And then here's another test. A widow who's starving to death. She and a little boy. And God has told him she will feed you, but when Elijah gets there, she says she has nothing to feed. All right. Verse 13, Elijah said to her, "Do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said. But first make me a little cake of it." He doesn't mean something sweet here. It's a little piece of bread. "And bring it to me, and afterward make something for yourself and your son." What is he saying? Hospitality and giving to the other. Very important. And if you're putting the other in the center of your life, guess what? Your life begins to change. "For thus says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, the jar of meal will not be emptied, and the jug of oil will not fail until the day that Yahweh sends rain on the earth." See, it's a famine. No rain. You will have enough until it rains again. Okay? She went and did as Elijah said, so that she, as well as he and her household, ate for many days. The jar of meal was not emptied, neither did the jug of oil fail, according to the word of Yahweh that he spoke through Elijah. All right? Now after this, the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, became ill. His illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. She then said to Elijah, "What have you against me, O man of Elohim? You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to cause the death of my son." But he said to her, "Give me your son." He took him from her bosom, carried him up into the upper chamber where he was lodging, and laid him on his own bed. He cried out to Yahweh, "O Yahweh, my Elohim, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I am staying by killing her son?" Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried out to Yahweh, "O Yahweh, my Elohim, let this child's life come to him again." Yahweh listened to the voice of Elijah. The life of the child came into him again, and he revived. Elijah took the child, brought him down from the upper chamber into the house, and gave him to his mother. Then Elijah said, "See, your son is alive." So the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know you are a man of God, and that the word of Yahweh in your mouth is truth." Jesus will do even more. Okay? Let's go into chapter 18. After many days, the word of Yahweh came to Elijah in the 3rd year of the drought. Okay, he's told Ahab it's not going to rain again till I say. And he's not going to say till God tells him. Now 3 years have passed. "Go, present yourself to Ahab. I will send rain on the earth." So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. The famine was severe in Samaria. Okay, so the northern tribes are called Israel. The territory where they live is called Samaria, you recall. Let's skip on over to verse 17. I think picks up the story well. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel?" He remembered he had told him it wasn't going to rain 3 years before. And Elijah answered, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have forsaken the commandments of Yahweh and followed the Baals." And the Baals, remember, were simply the gods and goddesses of fertility. Anybody need any help with that? All over the planet, people worship gods and goddesses of fertility. And the old myths about the Baals and Ashtarte were that in the summertime they lay down and took a long nap. About 7 months they slept. And in the fall of the year, when the harvest was in, the people who were pagans and worshipped these gods and goddesses of fertility had a rip-snorting big party, too much to eat, too much to drink, too much sex with too many different people. And when the fall thunder would start and rain, they believed they had waked up these gods and goddesses of fertility. They were stomping around heaven, and now it was going to rain some more. And with all this hooping and shouting and hollering and carrying on, and lots of sex themselves, they intended to inspire the gods and goddesses of fertility. That's what that was all about here. All right. You have forsaken the commandments of Yahweh and followed the Baals. Now therefore have all Israel assemble for me at Mount Carmel with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. That is, the people of the royal palace, those whom you and Jezebel are feeding. Get them all up to Mount Carmel and bring your 450 prophets. We're about to have a showdown here. Now, let me remind you, if you haven't been to Israel, that Mount Carmel is right over here on the coast. It's north of Caesarea, where Pontius Pilate would live in Jesus' time. It's up north of there. It's right near the modern-day city of Haifa. Okay, if you recall, Haifa is right up here, major port city. And Mount Carmel is right on the coast. So it's not Mount Everest or anything, but it's a hill to you and me, a little more than a hill. It takes the bus a little time, 30 minutes maybe, to wind its way up there. It's not huge. But from Mount Carmel, you can see all the way down the Jezreel River Valley. Jezreel. And it's a very fertile place. This is the green, growing part of Israel. This is the desert part down here. From Jerusalem south, this is all desert. It's green up here, and the Jezreel River. And strangely enough, even though it begins just inland a little bit, it flows toward the Jordan, not toward the Mediterranean. So it's on this hill right here, looking over the Jezreel Valley, that this big confrontation is going to take place between Elijah and all these prophets of the Baals. You know this story well. So verse 20, so Ahab sent to all the Israelites and assembled the prophets at Mount Carmel. Elijah then came near to all the people and said, how long will you go limping with two different opinions? This is something I've emphasized in sermons before. You've heard people say, well, I touch all the bases. Well, I touch all the bases, I got a Star of David. I've got a cross. I've got a, whatever. That's what Elijah's accusing the people of Israel of doing. Supposedly they hold on to the Torah and the God who led Moses and the children out of Egypt. But then they go up the hills to these temples of prostitution of the pagan gods and goddesses of fertility. So that's what Elijah means. Here you go limping along, trying to hold on to both. The God who freed you from Egypt and all these gods and goddesses of fertility. If Yahweh is Elohim, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. The people did not answer him a word. He didn't talk back to Elijah. Then Elijah said to the people, I, even I only, am left a prophet of Yahweh. Not true. But it's the way he felt at that point. He feels terribly alone. He is surrounded by the enemy. 450 prophets of Baal. But Baal's prophets number 450. Let 2 bulls be given to us. Let them choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it in pieces, and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. Then you call on the name of your Elohim, and I will call on the name of Yahweh. The Elohim who answers by fire is indeed, and now it's with capital G, the Elohim. So all the people answered, well spoken. In other words, that sounds fair. That's okay. Yeah, why not? Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose for yourselves 1 bull and prepare it first, for you are many. Then call on the name of your Elohim, but put no fire to it. So they took the bull that was given them, prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, crying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice and no answer. They limped about the altar that they had made. At noon Elijah mocked them, saying, cry aloud, surely he is an Elohim. Either he is meditating or he's wandered away. Or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and must be awakened. That's what they claimed, that he slept all summer when it wasn't raining. Then they cried aloud, and as was their custom, they then cut themselves with swords and lances until the blood gushed out over them. They're doing everything possible to rouse their God. As midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of oblation, late in the afternoon. There was no voice, no answer, no response. Verse 30. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come closer to me," and all the people came closer to him. First he repaired the altar of Yahweh that had been thrown down. Nobody had used it for ages, like some of the churches in Europe. Beautiful museums with laundromats in some. Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of Yahweh came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." With the stones he built an altar in the name of Yahweh. Then he made a trench around the altar large enough to contain 2 measures of seed, as if he were going to plant something. Next he put the wood in order, cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood. He said, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." Just to be sure, let's make it really tough. Soak it in water before I ask for fire. Okay. Verse 34, then he said, "Do it a second time." And they did it a second time. Again he said, "Do it a third time." They did it a third time, so that the water ran all around the altar and filled the trench also with water. At the time of the offering of oblation, afternoon prayers, the prophet Elijah came near and said, "O Yahweh, Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are Elohim in Israel, that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your bidding. Answer me, O Yahweh, answer me, so that this people may know that you, O Yahweh, are Elohim, and that you have turned their hearts back to you." Then the fire of Yahweh fell and consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and even the dust, licked up the water that was in the trench. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The I am who I am indeed is Elohim. Yahweh indeed is Elohim." Skip to chapter 19. Okay? So Ahab, who's not very strong, not nearly so strong as his wife, told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. I left that part out. He then said to them, "Okay, you've lost, so you offer yourself up." And when those of you who are going with us in February, we get to Mount Carmel, there's a big statue there, big stone statue. And Elijah has his foot on one of the prophet's necks and cutting his head off. And the blood runs down Mount Carmel, and the blood of 450 prophets runs down the mountain and into the Jezreel River. And Jezebel sees the water turn red, and she knows this has not gone well for the prophets of Baal. And Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the Elohim do to me and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid. He got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, not Israel, you see. He left his servant there. Okay, now notice how far he runs. Mount Carmel, Beersheba. He's getting out of Dodge fast as he can. Jezebel said, "By tomorrow, the dogs will lick your blood out of the street." And he runs way down here. Now, this is a small country, but if you don't have an automobile, it was a long way. If you're walking or riding a little burro with your toes dragging the ground, it's a long way. It's about 90 miles between these two. So he goes 125 or so, 130 miles, all the way down to Beersheba. He's really feeling like God's only righteous man at this point. But he himself, Elijah, went a day's journey into the wilderness. And remember, wilderness is a synonym in the Bible for desert, into the desert. And came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. There aren't many trees out there in the desert. If you find one, it's because it's rooted in a little spring somewhere. There's a little bit of water. So they look for trees because chances are there's a little bit of water underneath it. He asked that he might die. It's enough now, O Yahweh, take away my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors. He lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep, hoping he's going to die. Doesn't want Jezebel to get to kill him and the dogs lick up his blood, so he's just going to lie down here in the desert and die. Suddenly, an angel touched him, said to him, "Get up and eat. You're not dying on me. Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones, a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of Yahweh came a second time, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you. I'm not done with you, got more to do for you. Eat." So he got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. Okay, for you new with us, let me just remind, in the two oldest traditions we have in the Bible, we call them J and E, you recall. J for Yahweh. J has a Y sound in Hebrew, as it does in German. When somebody says Yah in German, it's not spelled Y-A, it's spelled J-A. So J, as we have it in English, though it's pronounced Yahweh, and E for Elohist, or the Elohim. Recall that in those passages in J, God is called Eye Asher Eye, Eye Asher Eye, Yahweh. In the other, God's called Elohim. We believe these were oral traditions, that is, stories told around campfires, north and south, for hundreds of years. And then after there was an educated priesthood in the temple at Jerusalem, they could read and write, these oral traditions were put together. And one of the distinguishing characteristics is that one of those traditions called the holy mountain always Horeb, and the other always called it Sinai. It's the same mountain. Okay. But here you have it called Horeb. So what God has done is lead Elijah right back to the mountain where he showed Moses the burning bush, and where later he gave Moses the 10 Commandments. He's brought Elijah right back to the same spot. That's the point. At that place, he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I've been very zealous for Yahweh, Elohim of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. God, you got nobody left but me." And he said, God, "Go out and stand on the mountain before Yahweh, for Yahweh is about to pass by." Now, notice how similar this experience is to the one Moses had. When Moses was feeling so put upon, this gangizo, the word that's used in today's text in John, that is, the people mumbled and grumbled and complained and whined. "Well, we had it better in Egypt. He's brought us out here to die, to starve to death, without any water or anything else." Moses was feeling terribly alone, and God said, "Press your face, push yourself into that crevice in that big rock, because people aren't supposed to see God, and I'll pass by." And God got so close to Moses that Moses glowed when he came down from the mountain. You remember? He glowed from this presence of God that came so close to him. So this is similar to what's happening to Elijah. Stand on the mountain before Yahweh, for Yahweh is about to pass by. Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But Yahweh was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But Yahweh was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But Yahweh was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. Have you ever been in a place that was completely quiet? I remember when I was a child, on summer vacation, we went to Carlsbad Cavern. And we started down, led by one of the guides, national park ranger, leading this group of people down the trail, getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And finally the ranger said, everybody find a rock to sit on. Get a good seat, because I'm about to turn out all the lights, and you're going to see how dark is. And please don't make a sound. You're about to experience silence. And he turned the lights out. And it was really dark. It was really dark. And nobody said a word. And it was really quiet. Okay, that's what's being described here, sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, can you hear silence? He wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, what are you doing here, Elijah? Why have you come to this place? And he answered again, I've been very zealous for Yahweh, Elohim of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. And Yahweh said to him, go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. Where's Damascus? It's in Syria. He's here. Go there. The business, the hard work is here. What are you doing down here all by yourself? Get on the road. Go to Damascus. Okay? All right. Let's skip. Go to chapter 21. We're going to get back to dealing with Ahab and Jezebel. Later, the following events took place. This is again a story you've heard since you were a child. Naboth, the Jezreelite, You remember I told you the Jezreel River starts right at Mount Carmel and flows toward the Jordan. Okay, beautiful green place right here. Lots of farming there to this day. Lots of beautiful farming. So here is a man, a Jezreelite. He lives along that river somewhere, who had a vineyard, growing grapes in this territory, so named Jezreel because of the river valley. His vineyard happened to be beside the palace of King Ahab of Samaria. Now, this reminds me of the old joke they tell down in Texas of a person saying, I don't want all the land, just that borders mine. All right? So Ahab doesn't want all the land, just all that borders his. And here's a man who has a vineyard right next door. Ahab said to Naboth, give me your vineyard so that I may have it for a vegetable garden, because it is near my house. I will give you a better vineyard for it, or if it seems good to you, I will give you its value in money. But Naboth said to Ahab, Yahweh forbid that I should give you my ancestral inheritance. This has been in my family for years and years. Ahab went home resentful and sullen. I tell you, he's not as strong. He's going to go pout in front of Jezebel. She knows how to get things done. So Ahab went home resentful and sullen because of what Naboth the Jezreelite had said to him, for he had said, I will not give you my ancestral inheritance. He lay down on his bed, turned away his face, would not eat. Like a child. He's pouting. He just crawls in his bed and rolls over and faces the wall and will not eat or drink. Looking for some sympathy here. So you know what's going to happen. His wife Jezebel came to him and said, why are you so depressed that you will not eat? And he said to her, because I spoke to Naboth the Jezreelite and said to him, give me your vineyard for money, or else, if you prefer, I will give you another vineyard for it. But he answered, I will not give you my vineyard. His wife Jezebel said to him, Do you now govern Israel? In other words, are you not the king? Get up, eat some food, and be cheerful. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. Pull yourself together. I know how to handle this, she says. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal. Remember, writing materials of that day did not fold well, so they rolled them. You write and then roll them, and where the last flap comes over, you put a little blob of hot wax, and then you affixed a signet ring so that everybody could tell this comes from King Ahab. So she usurps his stationery and his wax and his seal, and she's going to take care of this. She sent the letters to the elders and the nobles who lived with Naboth in his city. She wrote in the letters, proclaim a fast and seat Naboth at the head of the assembly. Seat 2 scoundrels opposite him and have them bring a charge against him, saying, you have cursed Elohim and the king. And take him out and stone him to death. The men of his city, the elders and the nobles who lived in his city, did as Jezebel had sent word to them. You ever been to France? You discover that this magnificent palace outside the city, was outside the city, it's now the city's swallowed it up, of course, was once a hunting lodge. The king just wanted to get out of town and shoot a deer or something, and so it was just a hunting lodge, like a Camp David. But he discovered he could invite other nobles to come and hunt with him, and they wanted to be in the presence of the king. And so then he would make them play card games, and nobody dared defeat the king. And after they played for silver coins and gold coins, they played for their land, and nobody beat the king. And Versailles grew and grew and grew. Okay? Samuel told them that's what kings do. They take. That's what they do. So Jezebel sends out a letter as if it had come from the king and tells them to frame Naboth, take him out and stone him to death. Just as it was written in the letters that she had sent to them, they proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth at the head of the assembly. The two scoundrels came in and sat opposite him, and the scoundrels brought a charge against Naboth in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth cursed Elohim and the king. So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth has been stoned, he's dead. Mission accomplished. As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned and was dead, Jezebel said to Ahab, Go, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give you for money, for Naboth is not alive, but dead. As soon as Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, Ahab set out to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. There's only one problem, you see, and that is that God sees everything. God sees everything. He knew about the conversation between Ahab and Jezebel. He knew that Jezebel had written the letters and falsified the seal. He knew these two fellows were lying about Naboth, and God does not let things go forever unaddressed or redressed. Okay? Look at verse 17. Then the word of Yahweh came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Go down to meet King Ahab of Israel, who rules in Samaria. He is now in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone to take possession. You shall say to him, if you can imagine this sort of nobody from Tishbe in Gilead approaching the king and getting in his face like this, what God's asking him to do. Okay? You shall say to him, Thus says Yahweh, have you killed and also taken possession? You shall say to him, Thus says Yahweh, in the place where dogs licked up the blood of Naboth, dogs will also lick up your blood. Wow, you say that to a king? Ahab said to Elijah, Have you found me, O my enemy? And he answered, I found you. because you have sold yourself. I mean, the real issue here is, Ahab, you have sold yourself. You're not a king. You're not a king is supposed to ensure justice and righteousness. You sold yourself for this little piece of land. To do what is evil in the sight of Yahweh, I will bring disaster on you. Skip to verse 23. Also concerning Jezebel, Yahweh said, the dogs shall eat Jezebel within the bounds of Jezreel. Anyone belonging to Ahab who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat. And anyone of his who dies in the open country, the birds of the air, the buzzards will get them. That's what he's saying. Indeed, there was no one like Ahab who sold himself to do what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, urged on by his wife Jezebel. All right, let's skip. God doesn't always do things immediately. Sometimes it takes a long time for justice to run its course, and they are not done away immediately. Let's skip down to verse 29 of 22. Chapter 22, verse 29. Chapter 22, verse 29. So the king of Israel and King Jehoshaphat of Judah went up to Ramoth Gilead. So you got the king of north and south together on something here. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and to go into battle, but you wear your robes. That wasn't smart, you say. I'll be incognito, you be the king. Like a general going to battle with all the stars shining. You want him dead first off. So the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Verse 33. When the captains of the chariots saw that it was not the king of Israel they were pursuing, they turned back from pursuing him. But a certain man drew his bow and unknowingly struck the king of Israel between the scale armor and the breastplate. So he said to the driver of the chariot, turn around and carry me out of the battle, for I'm wounded. That's the king speaking. Turn around, get me out of here, I'm dying. The battle grew hot that day, and the king was propped up in his chariot, facing the Arameans, until at evening he died. The blood from the wound had flowed into the bottom of the chariot. Verse 37. So the king died and was brought to Samaria. They buried the king in Samaria. They washed the chariot by the pool of Samaria. The dogs licked up his blood, and the prostitutes washed themselves in it, according to the word of Yahweh that he had spoken. Verse 40. So Ahab slept with his ancestors, and his son Ahaziah succeeded him. God may move slowly, but he moves. And what he had told Elijah to tell Ahab has come to pass. He has died. A man who didn't even know he was killing the king killed him, and the dogs have licked his blood. Look at verse 51. Ahaziah, son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel. Verse 52. He did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh. Any surprise there? And walked in the way of his father and mother, and in the way of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin. It's just one after the other is what the author's saying. He served Baal and worshipped him. He provoked Asher Eye, the Elohim of Israel, to anger, just as his father had done. Things aren't getting any better. So let's go to the second book of Kings and see if there's any hope here. Verse 2, chapter 1. So Ahaziah had fallen through the lattice in his upper chamber in Samaria and lay injured. Don't know how you fall through the lattice, but he fell through the lattice. Up on the roof somehow. So he sent messengers telling them, go, inquire of Baal-zebub, the Elohim of Ekron, whether I shall recover from this injury. Okay, now hold a second. You need to refresh. Ekron, where is that? In Philistine territory. Gaza Strip today. Okay. In Philistine territory. It's down here. Ekron was one of the three major cities that Samson had to deal with way back there. And they're definitely heathen and definitely pagan. Now notice here the name that's given. Not just Baal at this point, but Zebub as well. Baal Zebub. And this name will be used in the Gospels. When Jesus is accused of getting his power from the devil. That he can chase out demons and make lame people walk and blind people see and deaf people hear because the devil's helping him. That's what the righteous people of his day say about him. And Jesus said, really? Can a house divided still stand? I mean, the works of Beelzebub are the works of destruction, devastation. And what I'm doing is healing people. I'm making sick people well. And of course, if you read William Golding's Lord of the Flies, you remember his story about World War II. A group of choir boys being flown out of the way of the advancing Japanese. Plane crashed on a deserted island in the Pacific. All adults killed. So in William Golding's mind, you have little choir boys. He thinks they're innocent. He's created another Garden of Eden. And what do? Within a few pages, one group is chasing the other group with pointed sticks. And one kid ends up dead. And they've cut the head off of an old hog they managed to capture. And they've stuck it up on a pointed stick, one end in the ground, one end up. And the old hog's head draws flies. Beelzebub. We think by Jesus' time, righteous folk were calling it Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. Even more specific, the Lord of the dung heap, the manure pile, which really draws flies. But in this time, with some people, still had credibility. It does with the king of Samaria, of Israel in the north. He still doesn't sin to ask Elijah, or a righteous person of Israel's God, but to Ekron, down in Philistine territory. Okay, go ask this God whether I shall recover from this injury. I've fallen through the lattice work. But the angel of Yahweh said to Elijah the Tishbite, you see, the problem is God sees everything. He knows everything. He knows this fellow's fallen. He knows where the messenger's going. So God rushes to Elijah the Tishbite, says, get up, go to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say to them, is it because there is no Elohim in Israel that you're going to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? In other words, don't you have a God you should be asking about this? Now, therefore, says Yahweh, you shall not leave the bed to which you have gone, but you shall surely die. So Elijah went. Now, you understand, he's to intersect. These messengers are going down to Philistine territory to seek wisdom, the king thinks, from these false pagan gods. And Elijah's going to ask him, why are you going there? Why didn't you talk to your God who freed you from Egypt? Okay, the messengers returned to the king, who said to them, why have you returned? He knows they haven't had time to get all the way down to Ekron and back again. They answered him, there came a man to meet us, who said to us, go back to the king who sent you and say to him, thus says Eye Asher Eye, is it because there is no Elohim in Israel that you're sending to inquire of Beelzebub, the Elohim of Ekron? Therefore you shall not leave the bed to which you have gone, but shall surely die. He said to the messengers, what sort of man was he who came to meet you and told you these things? Listen to the description. And then remember how the gospel writers describe John the Baptizer. See, these messengers don't even get his name. So the king wants to know, well, who was he? What did he look like? And they answered, a hairy man with a leather belt around his waist. And he said, it's Elijah the Tishbite. You see? Isn't this a marvelous storyteller? Yeah, it's wonderful. Go to verse 17. We're skipping. So he died, the king. He died, according to the word of Yahweh that Elijah had spoken. His brother Jehoram succeeded him as king in the second year of King Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat of Judah, because Ahaziah had no son. So he falls through the lettuce work and ends up dying, and he's produced no heir, so his brother will become king. But he's no better. I can tell you right off. He's going to be no better. Let's go into chapter 2 just a little bit. Now, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind out in desert country, as western Oklahoma, they sometimes call them dust devils, dust devils. Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal, one of the holy places. Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, for Yahweh has sent me as far as Bethel. We've talked about Bethel. It's right near Jerusalem, a little village, but very important in biblical times. The one on earth that James Missioner used in the source, that Bethel. As Yahweh lives and as you yourself live, Elisha says, I will not leave you. Stay here. I've got to go down to Bethel. No, sir, I'm not leaving you. So they went down to Bethel. The company of prophets who were in Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, do you know that today Yahweh will take your master away from you? And he said, yes, I know. Keep silent. Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. I know. He's about to die. I'm not leaving him. Elijah said to him, Elisha, stay here, for Yahweh has sent me to Jericho. He's sort of trying to get away from Elisha, moving from Bethel to Jericho and so on. But he said, as Yahweh lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. So they came to Jericho together. It means the company of prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha and said to him, this is another group, do you know that today Yahweh will take your master away from you? And he answered, yes, I know. Shut your mouth. Then Elijah said to him, stay here, for Yahweh has sent me to the Jordan River. But he said, as Yahweh lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of prophets also went and stood at some distance from them as they both were standing by the Jordan. These prophets finally are just going to see what's going to happen next. Then Elijah took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water. The water was parted to one side and to the other until the two of them crossed on dry ground. So they crossed the Jordan on dry ground as Joshua had been able to lead the people across on dry ground and as Moses had been able to lead the children of Israel through the Sea of Reeds. Now when they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, tell me what I may do for you. And why are you following me around? And Elisha said, please let me inherit a double share of your spirit. And he responded, you've asked a hard thing. Yet if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted you. If not, it will not. As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them. And Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha kept watching and crying out, Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. But when he could no longer see him, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. That's what you do when you grieve in the old days. You tear your clothes. So he knows Elijah is gone, and he tears his clothes. He packed up the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the water, saying, Where is Yahweh, Elohim of Elijah? And when he had struck the water was parted to one side and to the other, and Elisha went over. he does have Elijah's spirit, you see. He does. He has it. And when the company of prophets who were at Jericho saw him at a distance, they declared, the spirit of Elijah now rests on Elisha. So kings are coming and going, but so are the people of God. God still has a voice. So I'm going to mark chapter 4, August 29. If you haven't been to church, don't rush away.